there's something that he said about the benefits. And we get actually at our yeah, sure.
Obviously, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Especially in this house. We just give Cal a few more minutes and then we can jump into it.
He's on his way down.
Awesome. Cool. We're just waiting on our last panelist to arrive, and then we'll dive into it.
Do you mind if we get a group photo? Sorry? Do you mind if we get a group photo? Yes. I can record this really quick. If we can get a group photo with everybody really quick, with the camera right here. Yeah. Oh, no, you can't get it. Can you get it in the background? Yeah. Right, just right here, it's fine. And if you don't mind being in the middle.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us for our panel on the importance of staffing and resources for the land management agencies for outdoor recreation and the outdoor recreation economy. I'm Louis Geltman. I'm the Vice President for Policy and Government Relations at Outdoor Alliance. We're a coalition of the national advocacy organizations for climbers, kayakers, mountain bikers, backcountry skiers, surfers. And we work at the intersection of conservation and sustainable and equitable recreation access. Before we get into our panel, it's my great pleasure to introduce Representative Gabe Vasquez of New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District, who's hosting us today. Congressman Vasquez has a deep expertise in conservation and outdoor recreation policy, shaped by years of work in both advocacy and public service. Before coming to Congress, he led conservation initiatives across the Southwest, including efforts to expand access to public lands and ensure that outdoor recreation benefits and benefit communities equitably. He helped launch New Mexico's Outdoor Recreation Equity Fund, one of the first programs of its kind in the country, and worked to connect underserved communities with the outdoors. Congressman Vasquez is a sportsman, and he also previously served on the board of the organization where I work, Outdoor Alliance, where he helped to shape national policy priorities for the outdoor recreation community and help outdoor recreationists build a stronger voice in Washington, D.C. In Congress, Representative Vasquez serves on the House Agriculture Committee, where he's been a strong advocate for public lands and waters and outdoor recreation, and he's a lead sponsor of the Public Lands and Public Hands Act and continues to push for protections for iconic places like the Gila River. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Gabe Vasquez.
Thanks, Gabe. Thank you, Louis. Thank you so much, Louis. Thank you all for joining us here today. Thank you to our esteemed panelists who are joining us from different parts across the country to talk about a very important topic, an important topic to my district. You know, I tell folks when I come here that my district is bigger than Pennsylvania. Most of it is public lands, 4 national forests, 2 national parks, a lot of BLM land. Essentially, we are connected to the land, and the land is connected to us in my community. And that's really important because not only is it about culture and heritage and tradition, but it's also about building the economies in rural communities, many of whom have been decimated by mining and extractive industries that have left their communities. And so, just last week I was down in Silver City talking to about a dozen or so employees from the U.S. Forest Service that had either been fired or furloughed. Some had been fired, some had been rehired, but they're going to be fired again. And some of the stories that I heard from folks about the importance of what they do for things like wildfire mitigation, but also building trails, but also sustainability and carrying out the Gila National Forest's Forest Plan, which is the nation's first wilderness, designated wilderness area in the country. It was really devastating to hear in terms of what the impacts would be. Now, beyond proper land management, one of the things that are important to me is making sure that small businesses can thrive in rural communities like Silver City, like Glenwood, New Mexico, like Reserve, New Mexico, that are all bedroom communities to the Gila National Forest. They're gateway communities to the Continental Divide Trail. And without proper forest management and without proper access, we cannot grow our outdoor recreation economy in some of these rural places, which is really critical to making sure that these small communities thrive, survive, and have different opportunities to build the next generation of stewards of our public lands. Now, one of the projects I got to work on while I was a staff member for Senator Martin Heinrich was the creation of the Cosmic Campground. And that was the second international dark sky sanctuary in the entire country. And Catron County, where this dark sky sanctuary would be located, is in the most conservative county in New Mexico. However, working with the local county commission and local business owners, and after the decimation of the Catwalk National Recreation Trail because of one of our largest fires in New Mexico, the Whitewater Baldy Fire, the Catwalk, as they call it, was decimated by record floods, and they lost all of their tourism opportunities. And so to go into a conservative community in a county and talk to folks about the importance of dark sky photography and amateur astronomy and folks that were going to be out in the wilderness on a concrete pad looking at one of the darkest skies in the country was not something that a conservative community necessarily was familiar with, but they gladfully accepted any opportunity to have those dollars come in from places in Arizona and Colorado and Utah and Texas, and really anybody who is looking at the darkest skies in the country that wants to come and experience both the nation's first wilderness and also have the opportunity to look at the cosmos and the dark stars. And it's become one of the most popular campsites now in the Gila National Forest. And that is a testament to how we can use outdoor recreation as a tool to be able to help support local economies, regardless of your party, regardless of what your beliefs are on many other things. And so we work on a number of different policies in our office that help support and that impact outdoor recreation economy. And that starts with both the protection of public lands and the management, good management of federal public lands. And so what we have seen so far is that the indiscriminate firing or furloughing of federal employees at various land management agencies has deeply impacted our ability to manage those lands properly and to be able to provide access to folks. And so I've heard stories already, not just from the workers, but from the people who experience these lands, from hunters, from anglers, from backcountry campers, from CDT trail walkers, that their experience is already being impacted by the lack of resources. I mean, something, for those folks that have experienced some time in the outdoors, when that vault pit toilet is closed and that was, going to be your source of refuge after walking for 10 hours or so, that hurts, right? And in more ways than one. But it's little things like that that are already being impacted by the lack of resources and where our land management agencies are going to put their dollars, where they're going to put their staff. And that also speaks to the issue of wildfires. We've experienced the two largest wildfires in New Mexico's history over the last 2 years, including in the Gila National Forest, the Black Fire, and the recovery period after the wildfire is just as important as actually addressing the wildfire itself. But more importantly, mitigating the impact of that wildfire to begin with, having access to the proper areas in wilderness places so those hotshot crews can go in, as an example, understanding what thinning fuels looks like in heavily forested areas that haven't been thinned before is part of the job that these employees who have been fired are tasked with doing. And then also, very important to my district, is protecting the cultural and historical and archaeological artifacts of these places. Using the Gila as an example, the Warm Springs Apache, the Chiricahua Apache, the Fort Sill Apache, and Puebloan people, their history is in the forest. And when we lose those precious resources, it impacts both those communities, but it also impacts the folks who want to go and experience this culture, right? Places like the Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument that's in the Gila National Forest. And so from outfitters to climbers to small business owners, they're already seeing the effects of these staffing shortages, including closed trails, backlog maintenance, and delayed permits. And these aren't abstract budget issues. They're real consequences that impact these communities. And so public land should be part of our economic solution for rural America and rural communities across the West. And so by fully funding our land management agencies, we can create good paying jobs, improve access, and ensure future generations can enjoy what we all love to do. And so as a former board member of Outdoor Alliance, and somebody who went to the Mountaineers Gala just this last weekend in Seattle, Washington, and listening to Cal's podcast today where he had the former director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service talking about the impacts of migratory bird treaties and flyways. This impacts all of us, and it's a bipartisan issue. This is what I want to stress, is that both Republicans and Democrats are ready to stand up against any potential further cuts or the sell-off or transfer of federal lands. And that's what we're working on here at our office, and something that's deeply important to me, both for economic reasons, cultural reasons, and because I'm a hunter and angler myself. And so if I don't protect the things that I love, then I don't get to leave that behind, to my kids or future generations. So with that, I just want to say thank you. We'll have a conversation here today moderated by Lewis, who's been terrific and has been working on these issues with a variety of stakeholders of human-powered recreation in the outdoors. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you so much, Congressman Vasquez. And thank you all again for joining us to hear our panelists speak about the importance of well-resourced land management agencies for supporting outdoor recreation and the outdoor recreation economy. Activities like hiking, camping, hunting and angling, paddling, climbing, skiing, mountain biking. These pursuits are super meaningful in the lives of their participants for a whole range of personal reasons. And they also support nearly $1.2 trillion in gross economic output, 2.3% of GDP, and nearly 5 million American jobs, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And I want to pause quickly here and just extend our gratitude to Outdoor Industry Association, whose Capital Summit is going on this week. I hope you guys get to see a number of their participants making the rounds today. They were the first folks who were creating this economic data around the importance of outdoor recreation, and through some far-sighted legislation, we're able to sort of hand over that task to BEA going forward. And now we have these government numbers to help really put a finer point on how important the outdoor recreation economy is. And really, as eye-popping as those economic numbers are, they are really only the tip of the iceberg when you think about how important outdoor recreation amenities and access to public lands and waters are in bringing in businesses and high-skilled workers to rural communities across a whole range of industries. So all of these benefits that outdoor recreation provides, they depend on a few things. The first thing is keeping public lands public and accessible. And to that end, we really want to extend our gratitude to Congressman Vasquez for his work with Congressman Zinke on the Public Lands and Public Hands Act, which is hugely important to our community. The second thing we need is conservation. All of these pursuits that we enjoy on public lands and waters are premised on the opportunity to interact with aesthetically compelling, well-managed, healthy, wild landscapes. And, that includes protection from incompatible development, and also restoration, thoughtful active management, and taking a judicious approach to extractive activities on multiple use lands. The third thing we need is sound recreation management policy to make sure that recreation is sustainable and to manage multiple use conflict and ensure a quality visitor experience. We're coming out of a huge moment of bipartisan consensus on the importance of outdoor recreation with the passage of the Explore Act. And I want, on behalf of our community, to extend our gratitude to Chairman Westerman, the late ranking member Raul Grijalva, Senator Barrasso, and former Senator Manchin for their leadership in getting that bill done. A huge deal for our community. So finally, and getting to the point of the panel, the last thing that we really need is well-resourced land management agencies to be able to fulfill their stewardship responsibilities. That's, pursuing planning in order to put order to all of the activities that take place on multiple use lands. It's leading active management and restoration work, planning and implementing recreation infrastructure, doing science and research. These are hugely important activities that we need land management agencies for. And over the last few months, we, as the administration has pursued its goals around government workforce reductions, land management agencies have taken a big hit. Our best estimate is that the Forest Service has lost 25% of its staff at this point. And there have been big staffing losses at the agencies in DOI, and we're expecting to see more staffing reductions to come. Absolutely, this is unprecedented, but at the same time, I think it's important to acknowledge that staffing and resource challenges of the land management agencies didn't just start 3 months ago. These are longstanding problems. Recreation staff at land management agencies has declined over the last 20 years at the same time that visitor use is growing. And last fall, the Forest Service was forced to announce a hiring freeze for seasonal employees. So with all of that, I'm going to hand things over to our panel to introduce themselves, maybe just start with where you're from and say a little bit about your organization and the ways in which you interact with public lands management agencies. Should we start down there on the end with you, Cal? Does that work?
Sure. Doing this right. My name is Ryan Callahan, Cal. I am the North American Board Chair for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. We're a little over 30,000 members across North America. Additionally, I'm the Director of Conservation for a business called Meat Eater, which is across the entire outdoor space. We do hunting, fishing, conservation, culinary, and we try to expose people to the love of the outdoors. Both the nonprofit and the business side mesh really well because that's what I grew up doing. I'm an outdoorsman through and through. I couldn't make it through school. I just was looking outside way too much, so I did what every other kid does in Montana, which is you guide fly fishing, and then you guide hunting, and then you guide skiing, and we never were guiding local people. They were all people from other walks of life, very different than a 19-year-old Montana kid. And I became a wilderness advocate and an advocate for the outdoors when I saw those people come in very stressed, chain smoking sometimes, addicted to sleeping pills sometimes, suffering from PTSD, and saw the transformative experience that they would go through on our public land. So that's when I became a wilderness advocate and an advocate for our access, equitable access to the outdoors. On the business side, we're doing about $100 million in revenue. You cannot do that just with Montana people. You can't do that just with Idaho people. This is a national interest, and it's growing. It's not diminishing. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Betsy Robley. I am the Conservation and Advocacy Director with an organization called the Mountaineers. We were founded in 1906, originally as a mountaineering club in Washington State, and we've grown into a nonprofit organization that's mission is to help people explore, conserve, and learn about the lands and waters of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. We do programs for adults and kids to get them outdoors, learn how to do a number of activities, everything from rock climbing to mountaineering, snowshoeing, sea kayaking, backpacking, and getting people to do that in a safe and sustainable way, practicing responsible recreation. We have youth adventure programs for teens. We are kind of the place to go in the Pacific Northwest if you want to learn how to climb Mount Rainier. And then we also have a publishing division that publishes outdoor books, guidebooks, And I run our conservation work, kind of empowering all of those 16,000 members to advocate on behalf of the landscapes that they love. And public lands are really the infrastructure that makes our work possible. We need public lands, well-managed public lands, to be able to introduce people to the outdoors and to allow them to do that in a safe way. And so that's why we're here. We're a member of Outdoor Alliance, and public land managers and the stewardship that they provide is absolutely critical to our programs that we run. We also rely on facilitated recreation permits or special use recreation permits to take people outdoors on federal lands. And that's why we are especially grateful to all of you for passing the Explore Act last year. That's going to simplify that process that helps groups like the Mountaineers take people out, but also other guides and outfitters who are largely small businesses who are just trying to help people explore the outdoors. So yeah, that's a little bit more about me and us.
Thank you, Betsy. I'm Mike Reardon from the Carolina Climbers Coalition. We're a nonprofit serving climbing in North Carolina, South Carolina, a bit of Virginia, a bit of Tennessee as well. I'm their executive director. We also have a great field staff as well. Our organization was formed in 1995, so we're one of the older of the local climbing organizations throughout the U.S. We were invited to be a part of this through the Outdoor Alliance, so thank you, Lewis and Outdoor Alliance, for having us here. And serving different climbing areas also means serving different hiking areas and trails and access areas that anglers use and mountain bikers use and hunters use. We serve federal lands. We also serve state lands, municipal lands, and private lands. Essentially, if there's access or the possibility of rock climbing on the property, we're trying to work on it in different ways. Some of that also includes owning properties. So we are a land trust. We own 5 different climbing destinations throughout the Carolinas and Virginia, one of which includes the tallest rock face in Eastern America called Laurel Knob. It's our own little Yosemite on the East Coast, which is pretty cool. And for me, just personally, that's in 2006, the Carolina Climbers Coalition purchased Laurel Knob and opened it to public access. And one of our challenges in the East Coast versus the West is that there's a lot of private lands that we try to open up to public access for recreation. And Laurel Knob was a great example of that, of our conservation initiative to purchase and conserve that property. More recently, we have had Hurricane Helene come through, which some of you may be familiar with. It's one of the largest disasters of the United States, and all of our lands were affected in some ways, and all of our outdoor recreation economy was affected in some way, and certainly on our national forest through North Carolina, which is Pisgah National Forest and Nantahala National Forest specifically were heavily hit, as well as Cherokee National Forest in Tennessee. So those are some of our U.S. Forest Service lands that were affected, but then also the Smokies, the Blue Ridge Parkway, all National Park Service properties that were heavily affected by Hurricane Helene, and still many of these properties are not open today because of the effects of Helene. In North Carolina, a lot of the reason people live and work in North Carolina is outdoor recreation. Our economy is largely based on outdoor recreation and the proximity to these incredible lands, whether they're federal lands or private lands, like I had mentioned, or state-run lands. And it's that economy fuels $16.2 billion into our state's economy, which is 2.1% of the GDP. And so it's very important to North Carolinians to have this recreation open, accessible, and safe. And I think we'll dive more into some of the federal layoffs and kind of how that affects us and how that affects nonprofits like the Carolina Climbers Coalition's ability to go and restore some of these properties and restore some of the access that we all enjoy and celebrate on a regular basis.
Thanks, Mike. So I guess recognizing in particular that it's been a little bit hard to get good information about everything that's been happening with the land management agencies in recent months, it's been little bit of a moving target. It would be great to hear you all just speak about what you all are seeing in your local communities by way of agency staffing reductions and hear how that's affecting your work, how that's affecting your local communities. And I guess any of you guys can just jump in and start.
I'd be happy to start things off. So I think it's important, first of all, as Lewis mentioned in the beginning, to see these cuts as kind of a cascading chain of impacts. So as we all know, these agencies have been underfunded for years. In the fall, the Forest Service in particular lost their ability to hire seasonal workers for the busy summer season. And then in the last 3 months, we've seen about 25% of the Forest Service staff leave due to early retirements and deferred resignation. And what we're seeing on the ground in Washington is really a decimation of our local on-the-ground recreation staff. So those are the people who are maintaining trails, cleaning restrooms, issuing permits, doing visitor education, assisting with search and rescue. And I'll give you a couple of examples from Washington State in particular. So we have the #1 most visited national forest in the country, the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest, which extends from the Canadian border down through the chain of the Cascade Mountains all the way to Mount Rainier. So it is 1.7 million acres of land, about 1,500 trails, 280 recreation sites. It's very close to cities like Seattle, so it receives 2 million visitors a year. So over 70% of the recreation and trails staff of this national forest are gone. And that includes the seasonal staff and then the people who have left in the last 3 months. So we went from about almost 75 permanent and seasonal staff last year to just about 20 today. So 20 people to patrol that whole area, make sure that safety is preserved, to kind of rescue people who are get themselves into trouble in those jagged peaks of the Cascades, to open campgrounds, to pump toilets. And we're really concerned for what that means for the summer recreation season, for mountaineers programs that are going to be doing trips to that area. We get a lot of storms, winter storms in the Cascades, and we're afraid that, people are going to go out to their favorite trail, find it choked with like blowdowns, and have to haul themselves over logs to get to their campsite. We've been really emphasizing we need safe, sustainable, accessible outdoor recreation to support recreation economies, to support just people wanting to get outside and explore their public lands. And that's really under threat this season in Washington for, both Washingtonians and visitors alike.
I think Betsy hits a lot of this right on the head. Our folks that recreate, particularly with small families, and are more reliant on established resources, pit toilets, established campgrounds, potable water, they're going to feel the effects of this first and already are. Looking down the road, more towards possibly some of our backcountry community, we're really going to get hurt is there's this growing agreement with this idea, this misnomer, that there's no local management with our federal agencies. And that's just absolutely not correct. Our local resources in the federal government on these forests or BLM grounds, they're stewards of those grounds. And when they got, under the Biden administration, when they got this notice that they couldn't hire their seasonal employees, they didn't sit on their butts and go, okay, gang, we can't do this. They said, our job is to maintain this forest and these trails and these campgrounds. And so they went out to nonprofits and they figured out how to get that funding and work around the federal hiring freeze and hire people to work those trails and work those campgrounds. That's institutional knowledge. That is a hustle culture to steward those lands, and we just lost a ton of those people. The next employee that just came in, that's what they were supposed to inherit, was that culture, that feeling of pride of working against the odds to take care of this place for those communities. And looking 2, 3, 4 years down the road, I think that's a crisis in the making.
Thank you. Yeah, and very similar situations for us on the East Coast and in the Carolinas with the staffing cuts. There's a great culture in North Carolina of non-governmental organizations, nonprofits, like the Carolina Climbers Coalition, but there are so many others, and I don't want to even start listing them, because if I do, then I'm going to forget some critical ones. But there are so many organizations that serve our public lands in different ways, and primarily organizing volunteers. I mean, our organization, in comparison to some of these other organizations that serve federal lands in North Carolina, is pretty small, and we serve 8,000 on average, 8,000 hours a year of stewardship work. Most of that, if not all of it, is not paid for through the federal government. However, those that do have, those nonprofits that do have what's called a cost share agreement with the National Forests, do receive some federal funding, and they rely on that in order to, number one, pay their staff, but number two, organize volunteers to counteract some of those dollars. So when Hurricane Helene hit, we were all energized as people that serve National Forests and want to open them back up, just like Betsy said about their trails being logged up with trees. We would have in a mile, we had 1 mile of trail where we documented 200 downed trees in 1 mile over that trail. So there was a lot of trees to take care of. But what we're seeing with some of these agency cuts is that certain organizations are not receiving their funding even after doing the work. So, for example, serving the Appalachian Trail, one organization has been working for the last 3 months and is under a cost share agreement. So they have an agreement with the federal lands there, but they're not able to get their reimbursements because the chain of command is broken due to federal layoffs up on the higher levels. So our local Forest Service staff, so that includes district rangers and so on, have done all they can in order to get that funding, which was Helene disaster relief funding, to come down to the nonprofit organizations. But the sticking point is that in what we assume is either District 8 or the DC office is where some of those funds are stopping because of some of these federal layoffs. There's not the chain of command any longer for our local rangers to then get the permissions and or the funds to come back down to the nonprofits that are actually serving and repairing the areas. There's another organization in McDowell County serving Pisgah National Forest that's trying to work on bridge repair and culvert repair, after Hurricane Helene. They have a cost share agreement with the National Forest, but then they also, that cost share, they need to bring in matching funds from another entity, whether it be a private or state. So they brought in funds from the state. What their holdup now is that they have these Hurricane Helene relief funds from the state. They have a contract from the federal government, but since they cannot receive those funds from federal entities, the state is also held up. So that's why, 8 months after Hurricane Helene, we're still having bridges that are not repaired and not touched since the hurricane. And it's especially prevalent in these national forest areas, because now with some of the more accessible areas open back up, we still have so many areas that are closed up. We have the Black Mountains, which is the tallest mountain chain in southern Appalachians right now, is inaccessible, the entire chain. That includes Mount Mitchell, and much of the Blue Ridge Parkway as well is inaccessible. And again, these are areas that are so meaningful to someone like me who lives there and recreates there, but also so meaningful to businesses and all the visitors that come to North Carolina to visit these incredible areas.
Thanks, Mike. I feel like I'm really hearing a theme here, which is just recognizing the degree to which organizations like Carolina Climbers, the Mountaineers, other folks are bringing outside capacity to bear on the stewardship of our public lands, but recognizing as well that there's this really critical role that the agencies play, whether that's from a funding standpoint or from a, just the standpoint of approving the work and making sure that these recreation infrastructure projects are happening in a way that's concordant with other resource values. So I don't know if you guys want to expand a little bit on that, just around, the importance of having that sort of planning and infrastructure staff within the agencies. I know that wasn't on the agenda, but if there's anything you guys want to add on that note.
Yeah, I think what we've been talking about a little bit so far is the short-term impacts of these workforce cuts. But we're also really concerned by what we're going to see in the long term. And in the long term, you need people who are in the agencies planning more complex projects. So if you want to get a new trail system on the ground to attract visitors to an area of the state that's interested in more tourism, recreation tourism visitation, you need planners to be able to do the NEPA work, to get that project ready to go. What we call the ologists, all of the specialists that need to make sure that that project is concordant with, wildlife values, with water, other resources. They need to do that planning, and those folks are getting decimated as well. So going into the long term, we're concerned that we're just going to lose this infrastructure that we have and not be able to repair it or not be able to create new infrastructure. So we really, beyond the on-the-ground recreation staff, we need the specialists, we need the planners, we need the engineers, the archaeologists, the landscape architects. And if you don't have one key piece of that puzzle, say the tribal relations person is gone. You can't do consultation with tribes. That means a project can't go forward. So we really do need to have this whole network of folks within the land management agencies to do the planning, but also to interface with nonprofits like Carolina Climbers Coalition, to pick up the phone on the other end of the line if that trails group wants to do maintenance in a particular area. They can't just go and do it. They need permission from the land manager. They need to be able to have the support to do that work on the ground. And without that, you get this bottleneck where you can't leverage the resources of outside organizations, which is just plain inefficient.
Thanks, Betsy. Other thoughts on that?
I'd say there's a big difference between a professional force and a volunteer force. You can plant a heck of a lot more trees, a lot more sagebrush renewal, get rid of a lot more noxious weeds with the pros. Volunteers are great to have on the ground, but I think a lot of professionals are going to tell you that part of the reason to have that volunteer force out there on some of these restoration projects in particular is to spread the word of how hard the work is, and why we need professionals on the ground to do it. Another key factor out there is I'm a volunteer, and I have to clock out and get back to my real job, as all volunteers do. So we can be a big lift on certain projects, but we need professionals on the ground to lead that project and really show us how it's done from the get-go.
I want to expand a little bit on the long-term effects of some of these layoffs. The Forest Service in our region was greatly understaffed to begin with before these hiring or these firings, and one district, one of the most traveled districts, and if not the busiest Forest Service district on the East Coast, the Pisgah Ranger District, they were down 11 staff before any of the layoffs even happened. And that's a significant number for them already. And the Outdoor Alliance has worked greatly for years now on trying to increase the staff of Forest Service. Because as we know, if we compare outdoor recreation right now as to what it was in 1990, it is greatly expanded. We're at an all-time high of visitation throughout the nation of different federal lands, and to have our forest staff undercut, it's just asking for more difficulties and more trouble. So we're hoping the long range turns around.
Thanks, Mike. I guess my last question for you guys before we ask for questions from the audience. Congressman Vasquez spoke at the top about the impacts of wildfire, and I feel like we're here to talk about outdoor recreation, but wildfire is really the elephant in the room in a lot of ways for public lands management in the West right now. There are a lot of opportunities to address outdoor recreation values and fire protection in synergy, whether that's planning outdoor recreation infrastructure in a way that supports fire risk mitigation or fire suppression efforts, whether that's post-fire recovery, whether that's taking into account the fact that 75% of the staff of the Forest Service is red carded to work on wildfire, and we call these folks into service in the summer to work on fire issues during fire season. I'm interested in your all's thoughts on that relationship between fire, outdoor recreation, and staffing at the land management agencies.
I think fire is an incredible friend in the right context, and certainly in a grazing state like New Mexico, tall grass makes fat cattle, and fire makes tall grass. However, when we have these high-intensity burns, catastrophic burns, quote unquote, we also need the staff to come in behind and make sure that the noxious weeds, the invasive grasses are being mitigated, and we're replanting that native habitat that is still fire resistant, drought tolerant, and it's the reason that people came there to graze that land in the first place. That happens throughout the West. For years we've been talking about proactive fire management, which is prescribed burns, and mitigating those fuels that are on the ground, non-marketable fuels. And I hope we see that, but we need the staff to do that. Big fires are uncontrollable, so we need to find ways to start them on our own where it's appropriate, turn them in the right direction, and let them go to clear up that that ground and reestablish that early growth, which I'm speaking very much from the hunter side of me, which is absolutely fantastic for wildlife. Additionally, we need those knowledgeable people on the ground to say, yep, you can drop retardant here. We want to turn the fire. We want this area to burn. This one burned 2 years ago. Let's try to reroute that thing. Don't drop retardant in this drainage. There's Chinook spawning beds, bull trout habitat, critical habitat that, again, from the outdoorsman side, I would rather preserve that than a fancy second home built in a bad spot.
So I was recently asked by a colleague what keeps me up at night, which I didn't know how to start to answer that question, but I would say the number one thing right now is wildfire. I'm really concerned about the upcoming wildfire season. It's supposed to be a bad season in the West, and I spend a lot of time in rural communities in the Cascade foothills, and I will tell you, folks are pretty terrified of a fire coming to their community and no one showing up to help. As Lewis mentioned, 75% of Forest Service employees are credentialed to help with fire operations, whether or not they have the word firefighter in their title. They're people that help set up fire camps for the firefighters. They do coordination, they do public information briefings, and those people are critical to the firefighting efforts, just like the people who show up, with all the firefighting equipment. So, if 5,000 employees, 75% or 25% of the Forest Service have left the agency, that means we're short thousands of firefighting support positions. We're concerned about those rural communities that depend on the recreation economy. If people aren't, showing up and visiting their businesses on the way to the trailhead because of smoke and fire closures, that's an impact on the economy. In the long term, we also need these fuels reduction treatments come to the landscape, and that, again, requires planning and the long-term efforts to put those projects on the landscape, and that work is either paused or significantly slowed down right now because of the workforce reduction. So again, we're seeing both the short-term and the long-term effects on fire and how that relates to the recreation economy.
I think Cal mentioned the loss of institutional knowledge, and that is definitely something that we see with these layoffs since February, and it relates to wildfires. And in the Pisgah and in Nantahala National Forest, some of the folks that were laid off were red card employees, and some of them are not coming back. As you can imagine, if you're told 1 week that you don't have a job anymore and you're not given a solid reason why, and then you're invited back the next week, you might be apt to turn that down. So that loss of institutional knowledge, not only of a red card employee that has gone through that certification, but somebody that understands the complexities of wildfire in a certain area. A lot of that has gone out the door with these cuts, and will continue to go out the door if these cuts continue. With us on the East Coast, wildfire is usually not the biggest concern that we have, but as of late it is. We had in Western North Carolina and upstate South Carolina in the mountains, we had a 1-2 punch with Helene. We had Helene come through, and then just they went out about 3 weeks ago. About 30,000 acres burned in Western North Carolina and South Carolina, where a lot of the forest staff that were existing had to respond to that. And we see that a lot as well, is that our Forest Service staff, in addition to all the visitor and work that they do with nonprofits, they're also constantly having to respond to fires, whether it's in our district or not. So sometimes they're going out west, or they're going to other districts to help some of that fire mitigation.
Thank you, guys. Do we have any questions from the audience for the panelists? We have a hard out at 10:30. All right. I guess just before I ask these guys for any concluding thoughts, I mean, I think, it bears emphasis again that as much as this problem has accelerated over the last 3 months, this is a long-term problem, staffing for the land management agencies. And, we really hope that, Congress will be forward-looking and thinking about solutions for these staffing issues. We're really looking to offices that have a particular line of communication with the administration to help educate them about the importance of these staffing issues at the land management agencies. And we're also really looking to FY26 appropriations as a way to kind of blunt these losses. So, I know out at Outdoor Alliance, we're super happy to chat with anybody about that anytime. And I suspect our panelists are all the same. So with that, I don't know if you guys want to offer any closing thoughts or...
Sure. Yeah. Just thank you, Congressman Vasquez. I think you're on the right track. I think you're underselling it a little bit. I know you're doing your job and representing New Mexico and rural New Mexico, but a federal dollar spent is $3 in return, typically on the ground, and you're servicing not just New Mexico and New Mexicans, but the whole nation. It's a transformative place in these wilderness and national forests, and I know our membership and our customer base, they travel and go to these places, and they need to. It's for mental health and physical health and culture, and we can't put that stuff at risk. So thank you.
Yeah, I second my thanks to the Congressman in his office. I mentioned what keeps me up at night. I think what gives me hope is that the recreation community is super fired up about these cuts. And when the probationary employees were fired in February, you just saw an upswelling of support for those employees from the recreation community. We had over 100,000 people with Outdoor Alliance take action and write their members of Congress. So people are super fired up and ready to stand up and support the public lands that they love, the sports that they love, but also the businesses that rely on this, and just tell Congress how important this is to them, important for their mental health and physical health, and just the privilege that we have being Americans, that these lands are our lands. So that really gives me a lot of hope, and that's it.
I've got to echo the thank you to Representative Vasquez for all of his work with public lands, and just how much public lands mean to so many people. That connectivity to space is why I think we're hearing this outcry about federal workers on public lands. It's we need people to maintain it. We need laws to maintain it, and we're not going to give up on that.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much, Congressman Vasquez and staff, for hosting us. And thank you guys all so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.